This is part 29 in the series for the reading of the following document. 94th Congress, 2nd Session. Senate. Report No. 94 to 755. Foreign and Military Intelligence. Book 1. Final report of the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. United States Senate. Together with additional, supplemental, and separate views. April 26, Legislative Day, April 14, 1976. U.S. Government Printing Office. Washington. 1976. For sale by the Superintendent of Documents, U.S. Government Printing Office, Washington, D.C. 20,402, price $5.35. Stock No. 052-071-00470-0. Now I intend to resume the reading on page 342, where I last left off on part 28 of this reading series. Resuming page 342. The Blue Ribbon panel also cited the following allegations made by, quote, responsible witnesses, end quote, during the course of its investigation, noting that there was no way to confirm or disprove any of the charges because there was no existing procedure to evaluate systematically the efficiency of the intelligence process or the substantive value of its output. The human collection activities HUMINT of the services add little or nothing to the national capability. Defense attaches do more harm than good. The intelligence production analysts are not competent to produce a sound, useful product. Once produced, the product seldom reaches the individuals who need it. Each of these issues is discussed below. Subsection 2. Centralizing management controls. On this issue, the views of those who wish to avoid repetitions of past abuses by the community and those stressing the importance of improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the community's operations may not be compatible. Critics of centralization feel that reforms aimed at improving cost-effectiveness by concentrating budget and operational authority within the community might, at the same time, concentrate the power to undertake improper activities in the future. Centralization proponents counter that the diffusion of authority is as apt to encourage improper conduct as its concentration. A streamlined management structure would, they argue, promote the visibility and accountability of controversial programs. If the defense intelligence community were reorganized to promote more effective, centralized controls, what form might it take? The Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, ASD/I, has been the single most influential office in the preparation of the national intelligence budget under recent organizational arrangements. Although the ASD/I's authority is not absolute, he has more to say about how and where the national intelligence community invests its resources than any other individual by virtue of his fiscal review authority over the Consolidated Defense Intelligence Program, CDIP. ASD/I was established largely as a result of a recommendation by the 1970 Blue Ribbon Defense, Fitzhugh, panel, but it was not accord the full authority the panel proposed, and certain other complementary reforms were also not adopted. A classified supplement to the Fitzhugh report called for creation of an ASD/I who would also serve as a new Director of Defense Intelligence, DDI. End of page 342, beginning of page 343. Under this arrangement, the same individual would have direct line authority over the operations of the DoD intelligence apparatus via his position as Director of Defense Intelligence and responsibility for review of resources allocated to it as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. The Blue Ribbon panel further envisioned a reorganization of the DoD intelligence community along functional lines, separating collection and production activities into two new agencies, the heads of which would report to the ASD/I in his dual role as DDI. Complementing its objective of creating a clear chain of command from the operating aims of the defense intelligence establishment to the department's top policymakers, The panel also recommended the establishment of a Deputy Secretary of Defense for Operations who would represent the Secretary in all intelligence-related matters, and to whom the ASD/IDDI would report directly. Although the recommendation to establish a second Deputy Secretary of Defense was not accepted in 1970, it is part of the 1976 Executive Reorganization Plan. Subsection 3. Too much collection. Numerous studies since the mid-1960s have concluded that a serious imbalance exists between the amount of data collected by the technical sensor and surveillance systems and the ability of the processors and analysts to digest and translate these data into useful intelligence information. These studies recommend that greater attention be given to producing better insights from the information and less to stockpiling data. Analyzing the steep rise in the cost of intelligence activities during the 1950s and early 1960s, Schlesinger was among the first to blame the movement to employ ever more sophisticated technical collection systems, which he believed had led to, quote, gross redundancies, end quote, within community operations. He concluded that the rapid growth in the collection of raw intelligence data was not a substitute for sorely needed improvements in analysis, inference, and estimation. The scope and quality of intelligence output, he concluded, had not kept pace with increases in its cost. The committee did not find any studies suggesting that more collection capacity is needed, although deficiencies in the responsiveness of existing collection systems have been frequently noted. Examples of general observations on overcollection are: like the rest of the intelligence community, the CIA, makes up for not collecting enough of the right kind of information on the most important targets by flooding the system with secondary matter. The information explosion has already gotten out of hand, yet the CIA and the community are developing ways to intensify it. Its deleterious effects will certainly intensify as well, unless it is brought under control. The quantity of information is degrading the quality of finished intelligence. Footnote 16. Pausing the reading to read footnote 16. Quote, Foreign Intelligence Collection Requirements, the Inspector General's Survey, end quote. Hereinafter cited as the Cunningham Report. December 1966. Resuming the reading. End of page 343, beginning of page 344. Production resources can make use of only a fraction of the information that is being collected. There exists no effective mechanism for balancing collection, processing and production resources. Footnote 17. Pausing the reading to read footnote 17. Fitzhugh Report, July 1, 70. Resuming the reading. The period of rapid growth in intelligence costs that undoubtedly motivated much of the concern about overcollection has passed. Although the level of total real spending has now returned to what it was during the late 1950s, the efficiency with which intelligence resources are being apportioned among the collection, processing, and production functions remains an issue. An examination of the distribution of the national intelligence budget dollar in FY 1975 indicates that most of the community's resources support collection activities. The community is still spending 72% of its funds for collection, 19% for processing raw technical data, and less than 9% for the production of the finished intelligence products, bulletins, reports, etc., which the consumer sees as the community's output. There has been no significant change in the allocation over the past several years, nor is any anticipated. The collection of unused information results in greater inefficiencies than merely the effort wasted on collection. Backlogs in processing and analysis lead to duplicative efforts across the board, since the results of preceding collection missions are not always available to plan and manage current missions. Moreover, the rush to keep pace with the data disgorged by the technical collection systems encourages superficial scanning, increasing the probability that potentially important pieces of information will be overlooked. Subsection 4. Alternative means of collection. There are major disagreements within the community between proponents of traditional collection methods employing undercover agents, human intelligence, or HUMINT, and advocates and operators of the vast system of technical sensors. Approximately 87% of the resources devoted to collection is spent on technical sensors, compared to only 13% for HUMINT, overt and clandestine operations. Most of the intelligence experts interviewed during the committee's inquiry tended to endorse the existing 7-to-1 distribution of resources in favor of technical collection, but the efficacy of the technical sensors was not unanimously acclaimed. Deputy Secretary of Defense William P. Clements, Jr. commissioned the Defense Panel on Intelligence, 1975, footnote 18, largely because of his concern with the failure of the analytical community to alert national leadership to the October 1973 Middle East War. Pausing the reading to read footnote 18. Report of the Defense Panel on Intelligence, 175th. Resuming the reading. The Defense Panel report stressed the importance of upgrading HUMINT, noting,
quote, "We are not getting, as of 1975, the level or quality of information we need from this source," end quote. Footnote 18. The report credited the CIA's clandestine service as the most competent U.S. HUMINT, or HUMINT, collectors, but held this arm was not very responsible to Department of Defense DoD needs. End of page 344, beginning page 345. I'm going to resume the AI reader now.
Was concluded that the principal defense human collectors, the Defense Attached 6 System, DAS managed by DIA, were yielding valuable returns at small cost, but greatly needed a personnel upgrading. Other critics have been less charitable to the attaches. The problem of measuring intelligence output prevents accurate assessment of the contribution of different collection methods. Shifts in the uses of intelligence systems among peacetime, crisis, and wartime situations further complicate appraisals, as does the divergent interests of the national and tactical consumer groups. Civilian policymakers tend to plan for peacetime situations, whereas military commanders envision quite different wartime demands on the intelligence apparatus. The shifts of importance between peacetime and wartime are illustrated by the fact that much of the economic intelligence collected today would be accorded a much lower priority during a major war. Similarly, the verification of arms control agreements, now a major intelligence task, would be moot after the outbreak of hostilities between the major powers. Against this backdrop, only an approximate evaluation of the comparative worth of the various methods of intelligence collection has been possible for the committee. The results of such an evaluation are summarized as follows. Performance was judged against two criteria: the ability of the method to accomplish specified intelligence objectives, and characteristics deemed desirable in intelligence systems. Footnote 19. Pausing the reading to read footnote 19. The following intelligence objectives are considered: strategic warning, crisis indication, foreign weapons development, foreign military deployments, political and military intent. Economic information, political information, tactical military information. The following characteristics were considered: ability to penetrate denied areas, accuracy and reliability of data, responsiveness, wartime survivability, peacetime risks of incident. Resuming the reading. The analysis indicated that reconnaissance programs and SIGINT systems rank high in characteristics and performance. Not surprisingly, their costs are also the highest of all the competing systems. HUMINT did not score as highly as might be expected, based on the emphasis and funds accorded to this activity. Still, overall, the evaluation indicated that a fairly good correlation exists between the benefits achieved by collection activities and their costs. The priorities for spending among different collection systems appear to be appropriate. This does not mean that there is no need for adjustment in the pattern of resource allocation for collection methods. A major analytic effort on the part of the community offers the only means for achieving such efficiencies. Although the issue of proper balance between collection, processing, and production is usually phrased in terms of overcollection, it might also be described as a problem of underproduction. Deputy Secretary of Defense Clements stated, "In every instance I know about where there was a horrendous failure of intelligence, the information was in fact available to have averted the problem. But the analysts and the system didn't allow the raw data to surface." Footnote 20. Pausing the reading to read footnote 20. Quoted by William Beecher in Report O** The Defense Panel on Intelligence, 175. Resuming the reading. End of page 345, beginning of page 346. Similarly, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the arm of the Defense Department charged with the prime responsibility for intelligence analysis and production, concluded in a 1973 report, "The great disparity in the relative national investment in collection systems versus intelligence processing, exploitation, production and support systems has now reached a platitude where the anticipated payoff of a high-cost collection system is limited by the DIA's capability to exploit them fully. If production is the limiting step in the intelligence sequence, improved overall efficiency might be achieved by enhancing this capacity as well as by cutting back on collection. It is not clear, however, that the DIA's suggestion to spend more on production, implied in the above passage, would solve the largely qualitative shortcomings now limiting the performance of some intelligence producers." Subsection 5. Setting intelligence priorities. Intertwined with the issue of how much should be spent on intelligence activities is the question of how best to spend it. This poses a whole series of complex, interrelated choices ranging from subject matter to, quote, line balance, end quote, i.e., synchronizing the collection, processing, production, and dissemination among methods and means of collection. The most critical resource allocation choices concern the subjects and geographic areas against which the community should target its energies. Logically, this choice would reflect the changing interests of intelligence consumers, weighted according to national importance. Lower-order choices, such as the design and selection of a new technical collection system, would be made in order to meet consumer demands. Unfortunately, the system does not work this way, although expressed with varying degrees of forcefulness. Almost every previous study of the management problems of the national intelligence community has agreed that the formal mechanism for establishing priorities to guide the community's allocation of resources, i.e., the so-called requirements process, works poorly, if at all. In his 1968 report to the director of CIA regarding the actions taken in response to the recommendations of the Cunningham Report, Vice Admiral Rufus Taylor put the problem this way. "After a year's work on intelligence requirements, we have come to realize that they are not the driving force behind the flow of information. Rather, the real push comes from the collectors themselves, particularly the operations of large, indiscriminating technical collection systems who use national intelligence requirements to justify what they want to undertake for other reasons, example military readiness, redundancy, technical continuity and the like." The Schlesinger and Fitzhugh reports concluded that the focus of the community's efforts is determined by the program managers and operators of the highly complex technical collection systems that dominate the community's budget, rather than by the priorities of the intelligence. End of page 346, beginning of page 347. Consumers. Schlesinger called the formal requirements aggregated wish lists that could be interpreted as meaning all things to all people, thereby creating a vacuum which left the individual intelligence entities free to pursue their own interests.
My apologies, I'm going to read that. Schlesinger called the formal requirements, quote, aggregated wish lists, end quote, that could be interpreted as meaning, quote, all things to all people, end quote, thereby creating a vacuum which left the individual intelligence entities free to pursue their own interests.
Thereby creating a vacuum which left the individual intelligence entities free to pursue their own interests. The Blue Ribbon panel noted that no effective mechanism existed for consumers, either national or tactical, to communicate their most important needs. 21 requirements, concluded the panel, quote, appear to be generated within the intelligence.
My apologies, that actually was footnote 21. So, going on.
Appear to be generated within the intelligence community itself. End quote. Pausing the reading to read footnote 21. Two separate consumer priority polls, one undertaken by the staff of the DCI, the other by the DIA, were explained to the committee. In neither instance was there evidence that the study had produced a significant or lasting impact on management practices. Resuming the reading. In 1960, before major developments in data collection, a joint study group criticized the requirements process and recommended sweeping changes in the system. 6 years later, the Cunningham Report described the principal instrument in the requirements process, the Priority National Intelligence Objectives, PNIOs, as a, quote, lamentably defective document which amounts to a ritual justification of every kind of activity anybody believes to be desirable, end quote. Riley adding, quote, we found no evidence that an intelligence failure could be attributed to a lack of requirements, end quote. Poor communication between the producers of intelligence and the consumers continues to be the greatest obstacle to improved efficiency in the use of the community's resources. Subsection 6.
Subsection 6. Resource allocation.
Without judging the appropriateness of the community's subject or geopolitical emphases, a brief description of the way in which resources have been allocated follows. In FY 1975, more than half the community's effort, about 54 cents of each dollar, was targeted against military subjects such as doctrine, dispositions, force levels, and capabilities. 12 times more effort went into collecting and processing information of this kind than toward analyzing it. For technical and scientific subjects, the effort was divided in the ratio of 6 parts collecting and processing to 1 part analysis. Only about 6 cents on the dollar was focused on either political or economic subjects. Resource allocation by subject and function is shown in the table below.
And in the table here, we've got above it says National Intelligence Priorities, distribution of the fiscal year 1975 intelligence dollar by subject. And then there are, on the top, going to the right hand side, you have one section is collection, second section is processing, third is production, and then the last one is total from left to right. So going toward the subject area on the left hand side, reading from top to bottom, first subject area is military. Under collection it is 41.4, under processing 8.3, production 4.1, total was 53.8. Next section is scientific and technical. For collection 11.4, processing 1.8, production 2.3, total was 15.5. Next section is political. For collection 2.5, processing 0.3, production 0.6, total 3.4. For economic, next section, collection 2.2, processing 0.3, production 0.7, total 3.2. Next section, general, collection 14.9, processing 8.3, production 0.9, total 24.1. Now, for the next 3 sections is for the totals. Total fiscal year 1975. For collection 72.4, processing 19.0, for production 8.6, total 100.0. Next section, total fiscal year 1974. Collection 71.8, for processing 19.5, for production 8.7, total 100.0. Now, total for fiscal year 1976, in parentheses requested, collection 72.4, processing 19.1, production 8.5, and total 100.0. And then underneath, there's 2 sentences which say, based on the budgets of the Central Intelligence Agency, the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, and that position of the Defense Department's budget included within the Consolidated Defense Intelligence Program, CDIP, this does not include mission support costs. Okay. So that is the end of page 347. Now on to page 348. And I'm going to resume with the AI reader.
Resource allocation by subject and function. A second important way in which the existing priorities of the national intelligence community are revealed is through the distribution of spending across the geopolitical spectrum. There is little doubt that the most formidable potential threat to the United States is posed by the Soviet Union, with the second most dangerous potential military antagonist being the People's Republic of China. Most analysts would also hold that the nation's foremost commitment overseas is to the defense of its NATO allies. Vital interests in Asia include the security and pro-Western orientation of Japan and the defense of the Republic of Korea, to which the United States has had long-standing treaty commitments. Instability in the Middle East, to a lesser degree South America, and for the moment in Africa, would seem to argue for special attention to these areas as well. The attributable portion of the FI 1975 intelligence effort was distributed among different target areas as follows. Nearly two-thirds of the resources consumed, 65 cents of each dollar, were directed toward the Soviet Union and U.S. commitments to NATO. 25 cents of each dollar were spent to support U.S. interests in Asia, with most of this targeted against China. The Arab-Israeli confrontation in the Middle East claimed 7 cents. Latin America, less than 2 cents, and the rest of the world, about a penny. Subsection 7. Management efficiency versus security. In addition to the issues of balance in meeting the demands of both national and tactical consumers, and in the distribution of resources among the collection, processing, production, and dissemination functions in the intelligence sequence, there is also an issue of balance in the flow of information. Here the opposing considerations are security and management efficiency. There is a legitimate need to protect both what is known about a potential adversary's capabilities and the way in which the knowledge was acquired. The committee's investigation surfaced considerable sentiment that the community's preoccupation with compartmented security may have reached a point where communications are so restricted that effective analysis and dissemination of intelligence is impaired. The Cunningham report observed, quote, some, in brackets, intelligence, end brackets, tasks require piecing together many bits of information to arrive at an answer. Compartmentalization hinders cross-discipline cooperation. End quote. Supporters of the community's existing security arrangements counter that few analysts with a proven need to know are denied the clearances necessary to gain access to the information they require. Yet the problem is more subtle than this. Merely allowing the diligent analyst to acquire information is not enough. Kept in ignorance of certain subject areas by the compartmentalization system, it is difficult to determine which particular security barriers to storm in search of that last missing fact that could unlock the puzzle with which the analyst is grappling. The Cunningham report also noted a, quote, real need to make comparisons and trade-offs between intelligence activities and programs to select the most efficient systems, end quote. A need which the committee believes to be unmet today, despite organizational changes. The manager constrained to a narrow view by the blinders of compartmentalization is hardly in the best position to make such trade-offs. End of page 348, beginning of page 349. Section.
Section D. Agencies and activities of special interest. Subsection
1. The Defense Intelligence Agency. Formally established in August 1961 by Department of Defense Directive 5105.21. The Defense Intelligence Agency was envisioned by its civilian proponents as a means of achieving more centralized management control, thereby leading to a, quote, more efficient allocation of critical intelligence resources and the elimination of duplicating facilities and organizations. End quote. Footnote 23. Pausing the reading to read footnote 23. Press release accompanying the creation of DIA, cited in the Fruig Report, 769s. Resuming the reading. The agency was granted full authority for assembling, integrating, and validating all intelligence requirements originating with the Department of Defense, setting the policy and procedures for collecting data, and developing and producing all finished defense intelligence products. Currently, the agency is organized into 5 directorates, each headed by a deputy director. The Directorate for Estimates produces all DoD intelligence estimates, including DoD contributions to national intelligence estimates for the National Security Council, as well as forecasts in the areas of foreign force structures, weapon systems, deployments, and doctrine. The Deputy Director for Estimates is also responsible for coordinating with CIA, State, and NSA on intelligence estimates, and assisting these agencies with information on military capabilities and strategies. Intelligence assessments of special interest to military forces in the field are the responsibility of the Directorate for Production. Other directorates specialize in determining foreign technological progress and the performance of foreign weapons systems. coordinating service requests for intelligence information, and administering the defense attaché system. The national leaders who established the DIA were alert to the danger that it might evolve into simply another
In parentheses it said the Directorate for Attaches and Human Resources.
The national leaders who established the DIA were alert to the danger that it might evolve into simply another layer in the intelligence bureaucracy, and cautioned against thinking of it as no more than a confederation of service intelligence activities. Footnote 24. Nonetheless, a decade later executive branch reviews criticized DIA for perpetuating the very faults it had been designed to avoid: duplication and layering. Footnote 25. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 24. Gilpatrick Memorandum to Joint Chiefs of Staff, July 1, 69. Footnote 25. Fitzhugh Report, Appendix, National Command and Control Capability and Defense Intelligence, 1970, pp. 33-34, William Beecher, Report of the Defense Panel on Intelligence, 175. Resuming the reading. By 1970, each service actually had a larger general intelligence arm than it had had before DIA was created. At that time, the Blue Ribbon Defense Panel reported each, in brackets, military, end brackets, departmental staff is still engaged in activities clearly assigned to DIA, such as intelligence production including the preparation of current intelligence. The military departments justify these activities on the basis that DIA does not have the capability to provide intelligence they need. It is interesting that DIA cannot develop a capability to perform its assigned functions, while the military. End of page 349, beginning of page 350. Departments, which provide a large proportion of DIA personnel, maintain the required capability and continue to perform the functions. Footnote 25a. Pausing the reading to read footnote 25a. Resuming the reading. In trying.
Footnote 25a says Fitzgerald Report, pp or pages 23 and 31 to 32.
In trying to integrate massive and disparate defense intelligence requirements, DIA had become increasingly bogged down in management problems. Notwithstanding a number of internal reorganizations in search of the right mechanisms of coordination, at the root of the DIA's difficulties lie the opposing pulls from Washington-level civilian policymakers, who demand broad insights of a largely political character, and military planners and field commanders, who require narrower and more specific factual data. DIA has never really known which of these groups of consumers comes first. As the Fitzhugh Report stated, quote, the principal problems of the DIA can be summarized as too many jobs and too many masters. End quote. In retrospect, a strong case can be made that the DIA has never really had a chance. Strongly resisted by the military services, the agency has been a creature of compromise from the outset. For example, the director of the DIA was placed in a position of subordination to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS by designating him to serve as the JCS Director for Intelligence, replacing the J2 on the Joint Staff. Drawing again from the Fitzhugh Report. This arrangement put the Director of DIA in the impossible position of providing staff assistance on intelligence matters to both the Secretary of Defense and the JCS, whose respective stances on a given issue often are diverse. End quote. DIA was also reliant on the military for much of its manpower, which was initially drawn almost entirely from the intelligence arms of the various services. The argument for manning the new DIA with these personnel was to minimize the disruptive effects of organizational change on the flow of intelligence information. This same case was made for starting the DIA slowly. As a consequence, the agency never had the impetus which many other newborn government entities have enjoyed and profited from. Dominated and staffed in large part by the professional military, it is not surprising that DIA has come to concentrate on the tactical intelligence demands of the services and their field commands. Since DIA has always been heavily staffed with professional military officers on short tours, who are dependent on their parent services for future assignments and promotions, the perspective of agency analyses has often been biased to reflect the views of the services. When evidence is doubtful, the services have incentives to tilt an intelligent appraisal in a direction to support their own budgetary requests to justify existing operations and propose new ones. Footnote 28. Intelligence issues in the Vietnam War reflected this problem. Pausing the reading to read footnote 28. Harry Howe Ransom, The Intelligence Establishment, p. 103. Department of Defense, the Senator Gravel edition, the Pentagon.
One moment, skipped part of the citation. I'm going to read footnote 28 from the beginning. Harry Howe Ransom, The Intelligence Establishment, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard University Press, 1971, page 103. Department of Defense, The Senator Gravel Edition. The Pentagon Papers, Volume 4. Boston Beacon Press, 1971. Patrick J. McGarvey, CIA, The Myth and the Madness, pages 149-134. Pentagon Papers, Passam. Chester Cooper, quote, The CIA and the Decision Making, end quote. Foreign Affairs, January 1972. So, resuming the reading, on the budgetary side of the problem, the agency has been limited in its ability to control the activities of the services by the lack of follow-up. End of page 350, beginning page 351. Authority over its intelligence activities.
Quote, once money to support the approved program is allocated to the services, they may or may not use it for its intended purposes. End quote. Footnote 29. In an effort to remedy this, program management responsibilities over service components of the General Defense Intelligence Program, GDIP, were recently transferred from the Director of DIA to the ASD/I. The services concerned with autonomy, quote, it for its intended purposes.
I'm going to pause it there, scroll down, read footnote 29. Fitzhugh Report, page 23. Resuming the reading.
In an effort to remedy this, program management responsibilities over service components of the General Defense Intelligence Program, GDIP, were recently transferred from the Director of DIA to the ASD/I. The services concerned with autonomy and preservation of wartime capabilities may make the achievement of any appreciable reduction in duplicative effort an impossible goal, at least for general intelligence activities. The problem is not simply one of bureaucratic pettiness. There exist unavoidable trade-offs between tactical and national intelligence interests. The issue of which set of needs should dominate defense intelligence is a difficult one, with past disagreements on this point having played a major part in the dissatisfaction with DIA that has been expressed by the services, policymakers, and OSD staff. The jurisdictional dilemma was recognized by Schlesinger in his 1971 report, quote, if the services retain control over the assets for, quote, tactical, end quote, intelligence, they can probably weaken efforts to improve the efficiency of the community. At the same time, there is little question about their need to have access to the output of specified assets in both peace and war. End quote. He cited service resistance to the National Security Act of 1947, and to the 1961 DoD directive establishing the DIA, concluding, quote, powerful interests in the military opposed, and continue to oppose, more centralized management of intelligence activities. End quote. A second factor contributing to the dissatisfaction frequently expressed by DIA's customers has been the quality of the agency's analysis. Most often, this is perceived as a problem of professional competence. Illustrating the deficiencies in intelligence production as viewed by policymakers, Beecher has quoted former Secretary of Defense Schlesinger, quote, when you have good analysis, it's more valuable than the facts on a ratio of 10-1. But all decision makers get are factual, quote, snippets. End quote, end quote. Such tidbits, while often interesting in content, are of limited worth if not woven into context. The, quote, analyst, end quote, who serves as no more than a conduit for transmitting facts is not providing analysis. Yet, the job of the national intelligence analyst is to sort facts, discarding those which do not appear relevant, and piecing together what remains in a way that yields the broad insights policymakers find most useful. Besides a thorough understanding of his subject, the competent analyst must possess the qualities of perception, initiative, and imagination. Equally important, the analyst must be kept highly motivated and must be permitted, on occasion, to be wrong. This is the basis of the argument for maintaining more than one source of key intelligence estimates. Critics have often commented harshly on the quality of both civilian and military personnel in DIA. Footnote 30. Pausing the reading to read footnote 30. Example IBID, p. 29. Quote, Defense Panel on Intelligence, end quote, page 6. McGarvey, CIA, The Myth and the Madness 88, Passim. Resuming the reading. There are two facets to the problem of obtaining first-rate analysts. On the military side, capable and ambitious officers have traditionally avoided intelligence assignments.
End of page 351, beginning page 352.
Deeming such positions not conducive to career advancement. Of the officers who have gone into intelligence, many of the best qualified have tended to serve with their individual service agency rather than joining DIA. DIA's leadership maintains, however, that gains have been made in correcting service biases in the intelligence career field. Since 1974, promotion prospects for officers in the service intelligence agencies have become equal to or better than the service-wide averages. This offers scant consolation for DIA, however, since the promotion rates for attachés and Navy and Air Force officers serving with the agency have not improved proportionately, and remain less favorable than the service averages. There are, in fact, some indications that promotion prospects for officers at DIA may be deteriorating. Footnote 31. Pausing the reading to read footnote 31. Memorandum from Vice Admiral de Poyat to Secretary of Defense Schlesinger, March 4, 74. Memorandum from Lt. Gen. Graham to Schlesinger, November 19, 74. Resuming the reading. On the civilian side of the personnel problem, about 55% of the DIA's 2,700 professional-level employees are civilian. It is frequently argued that a predominance of military officers in middle management positions limits advancement opportunities within the agency for civilian professionals. In addition, a significant portion of those civilian personnel who have reached management ranks are in fact retired military officers. Many experts who have studied the DIA's personnel problems have concluded that improvement in the competence of the agency's civilian analysts is contingent upon a relaxation of the constraints imposed by civil service regulations. The 1975 report of the Defense Panel on Intelligence commissioned by Deputy Secretary of Defense Clements, asserted, quote, the professionalism of the intelligence production process must be improved substantially, end quote, and it strongly recommended exempting DIA's analysts from the civil service. Whether exempting civilian professionals from the civil service and increasing their management presence would bring about the changes required to transform the DIA into an effective competitor to the CIA in producing national intelligence estimates remains questionable. The DIA has a problem of image. It is a problem that calls for fundamental reform of its management attitudes and orientation, as well as in its professional staffing. In the absence of the complementary reforms, footnote 32, it would seem doubtful that the provision of greater incentives for its civilian analysts, and greater management latitude for the hiring and firing of these analysts by removing civil service constraints would in itself suffice to bring about the needed degree of improvement in performance. Pausing the reading to read footnote 32. Such as a new headquarters facility, a request that has been repeatedly denied by the Congress, but is an essential first step if a revitalized DIA within the existing organizational structure is decided upon as the preferred course of action. Resuming the reading. Moreover, data on the civilian grade structure of DIA, compared to that of the CIA, suggests that far too much emphasis may be placed on the need to raise the salaries of DIA civilian analysts. Conventional wisdom holds that the CIA has outperformed the DIA because its superior grade structure permits it to attract and retain more capable analysts. In fact, however, there is no significant difference in the professional grade structure, defined here as GS9, or equivalent, and above, of the two agencies. End of page 352, beginning of page 353. About one-third of the upper management positions at DIA are filled by military general officers, a much larger proportion than at the CIA, where fewer military personnel serve. Criticism of the professional standards of DIA's personnel has not been restricted to the agency's managers and production analysts. The defense attaches, who serve under the agency's direction as the Defense Department's Human Intelligence, HUMINT, collection arm, have also been a topic of considerable concern. One 1970 study of the Defense Attache 6 system warned that the representational and protocol responsibilities of attaches were assuming precedence over intelligence functions which should constitute the principal purpose of the attaches. 33 This preoccupation with non-intelligence activities remains strong today. Pausing the reading to read footnote 33. Report of the DIA Defense Attache 4 System Review Committee, May 30, 70, pp 11-1. 11-2. Resuming the reading. The qualifications of the officers assigned to attaché duty have been questioned. The chances for promotion have usually been low in DAS, and the tendency has been to draw a high proportion of Attache 6S from among officers on their last tours before retirement. Former DIA Director Donald Bennett dismissed 38 attaches outright for incompetence when he took over the agency in 1969. Footnote 34. Pausing the reading to read footnote 34. Staff Summary of LT. Gen. Donald B. Bennett, USA, RET, Interview. July 23, 75. Resuming the reading. The arguments cited above suggest two basic alternatives for the Defense General Intelligence apparatus: either retain the current centralized arrangement under the Defense Intelligence Agency, giving its director the authority he needs to fulfill his original mandate to manage all of DoD's intelligence collection and production activities, or disband the agency, returning its resources to the military services from which they were originally requisitioned, leaving the coordination of the tactical military aspects of these activities to the JCS, and forming a staff close to the Secretary of Defense to produce the national intelligence estimates he requires. Footnote 35. Pausing the reading to read footnote 35. A nucleus for which already exists in the Office of Net Threat Assessment. Resuming the reading. There should either be a major role for DIA, or for the service agencies, but not for both, unless they genuinely serve different functions. Duplication of intelligence analyses can be valuable if it promotes diversity and motivates through competition. This assumes that the separate analysts have different perspectives on the issues. In this sense, competition between CIA analysts and Defense Department analysts for strategic estimates is very useful. By arguing different points of view in forums in the intelligence community, they force disagreements to the surface and expose evaluations to closer scrutiny. DIA now has had little incentive to serve as a CIA-type foil to the services, since DIA has been primarily a military organization. Specific measures which might improve the performance of DIA within the existing organizational structure include the following. Subsection A. Enhance professional competence. Exempt DIA from civil service regulations in the same manner as CIA and NSA. Open more top-level jobs within DIA to civilian staffers. Increase incentives for the military services to send better qualified officers to DIA. Waive seniority requirements for defense attaches. Rotate DIA and CIA strategic analysts through each agency on temporary tours. Subsection B. Increase the responsiveness of the agency to the Secretary of Defense and his staff. Give ASD/I, or the new Deputy Secretary, authority to deal.
Quick note, that was the end of page 353, and now we're on page 354, and it begins with subsection B. Increase the responsiveness of the agency to the Secretary of Defense and his staff. So, Give ASD/I or the new Deputy Secretary authority to deal with
the substance of intelligence programs as well as the allocation of resources. Have the Director of DIA report directly to the Secretary of Defense, rather than through the JCS, as under the present arrangement. Appoint a civilian as either the Director or Deputy Director and make the Director subject to Senate confirmation. Subsection C. Increase DIA's management authority to match its management responsibility. Allow DIA to establish more requirements for the service intelligence agencies, and to eliminate intelligence products of the military services which are unnecessarily duplicative. D. Increase lateral communication between DIA and other components.
Subsection D. Increase lateral communications between DIA and other components of the defense intelligence apparatus.
Of the defense intelligence apparatus to integrate better the work of the operators, analysts, and planners. Encourage communication among DIA regional analysts and desk men in CIA, ISA, and other policy staff offices in DoD and state. Subsection 2. The National Security Agency. The National Security Agency/Central Security Service, NSA/CSS, provides centralized coordination, direction, and control of the government's signals intelligence, SIGINT, and communication security, COMSEC, activities. The SIGINT or Foreign Intelligence Mission of NSA/CSS involves the interception, processing, analysis, and dissemination of information derived from foreign electrical communications and other signals. SIGINT itself is composed of three elements: communications intelligence, COMINT, electronics intelligence, ELINT, and telemetry intelligence, TELINT. Communications intelligence is intelligence information derived from the interception and analysis of foreign communications. Electronics intelligence is technical and intelligence information derived from electromagnetic radiations, such as radars. Telemetry intelligence is technical and intelligence information derived from the interception, processing, and analysis of foreign telemetry. Most SIGINT is collected by personnel of the service cryptologic agencies located around the world. The Director, NSA/Chief, CSS has authority for SIGINT missions. The COMSEC mission protects United States telecommunications and certain other communications from exploitation by foreign intelligence services and from unauthorized disclosure. COMSEC systems are provided by NSA to 18 government departments and agencies, including Defense, State, CIA, and FBI. The predominant user, however, is the Department of Defense. COMSEC is a mission separate from SIGINT, yet the dual SIGINT and COMSEC missions of NSA/CSS do have a symbiotic relationship, and enhance the performance of the other. A specific National Security Council Intelligence Directive, NSCID, defines NSA's functions. It is augmented by Director of Central Intelligence Directives, DCIDS, and Internal Department of Defense and NSA regulations. NSA responds to requests by other members of the intelligence community, such as CIA, DIA, and FBI, to provide, quote, signals, end quote, intelligence on topics of interest. An annual list of SIGINT requirements is given to NSA and is intended to provide the NSA Director. End of page 354, beginning of page 355. And the Secretary of Defense with guidance for the coming year's activities. These requirements are usually stated in terms of general areas of intelligence interest, but are supplemented by, quote, amplifying requirements, end quote, which are time-sensitive and are expressed directly to NSA by the requesting agency. NSA exercises discretion in responding to these requirements. It also accepts requests from the executive branch agencies. NSA does not generate its own requirements. This is where recording of Part 29 stops.